I never believed in fate, but maybe, if a single glance could determine an entire decade of someone's life, then the moment I saw Elle on the high school courtyard at 16 was the beginning of everything. She stood in the middle of the crowd, her blonde hair glowing under the afternoon sun, sketchbook in hand, so engrossed that she didn't notice her name being called over the loudspeaker. I was just a quiet kid from the suburbs of Charlotte, standing there, watching, unable to imagine that one day I'd be holding her hand through almost every milestone of youth. Elle was a year older than me, just a few grades apart, yet I always felt like she was already a whole world ahead. She studied art, carried confidence, had her own style. I was still tangled in math tests and evening shifts at the gas station. But I loved her laugh, the way Elle said what no one dared to, and especially the way she looked at me, as if I didn't need to change a single thing to be worthy of love. We officially started dating when I turned 18. Elle had just gotten accepted to an art institute in New York, while I stayed home to study computer science at a local college. 2 years of long distance were tough, but they also taught me how to love maturely. No ownership, no control, just companionship. From phone calls lasting until 3 a.m. to handwritten letters she mailed every month, everything between us was genuine, not flashy, not dramatic, just deeply connected. I could feel her breath through the words she wrote. When I was 21, Elle came back to North Carolina to work at a small interior design studio. We rented a tiny apartment near downtown Raleigh, cramped but cozy. I still remember the feeling of placing the house key in her hand, arguing over where to put the bookshelf, buying a bedside lamp at midnight just because we were too excited to sleep. That was the first time I truly understood what a home meant. I remember the night Elle wrapped her arms around me from behind while I was fixing my computer and whispered, "I want our wedding to have lights like this." Pale blue LEDs cast strange patterns on the ceiling. I turned and smiled at her. "If you say yes, I'll string lights around the entire church." She laughed and nodded gently. We didn't have much money. I was working as a software engineer at a startup, and Elle spent most of her time painting and taking freelance interior projects. But we'd started planning our dream home, just a small place in Durham's suburbs, with a wide porch where she could grow lavender like she drew in her journal. I opened a separate account to save for an engagement ring, not a fortune, but enough to begin. I never regretted anything I did for Elle, whether it was driving over 5 hours just to bring her new art supplies, or pulling all-nighters to save enough for 2 tickets to an exhibit in Seattle. I loved her with everything I had, sometimes so much, I didn't understand how I could feel that deeply. Elle wasn't just my girlfriend. She was the milestone, the rear-view mirror, the lens that made my future clearer. Sometimes I thought, even if I lost everything else, as long as I had her, life would still be something to be grateful for. But what I didn't know was that even when you give someone your whole heart, they can still leave, because of something you never saw coming. I started noticing the shift last spring when Elle got a new job at a design studio downtown Raleigh. I was happy for her. It was a big leap from her small, scattered gigs. She told me, "I need a professional space to grow," and I supported her completely. But I never expected that place would become the first crack that brought down the entire wall. The studio was all women, most young, sharp-tongued, stylish. I never met them, but the stories Elle shared over dinner began to unsettle me. Not because she was hiding anything, but because her tone changed when she spoke about what they said about me. "Savannah asked why I chose someone like you," she once said while pouring tea, laughing. "She thinks Hudson seems too stable." I gave a light smile, didn't react. But "someone like you" replayed in my head like a needle stuck on vinyl. The comments didn't stop. One night, she said her coworkers invited her to a bar after work. They told me I'm still young, that I should explore more. Settling down with some IT guy who stays home all day is a waste. I wanted to joke, but Elle's eyes lacked the spark she usually had when talking about work. It felt like she was seriously weighing something, but hadn't found the words yet. At first, I thought it would pass. Elle had survived 2 years of long distance with me. How could a few shallow remarks shake us? But I underestimated the power of voices whispering into her ear daily, not from love, but comparison, jealousy, and judgment. Elle kept saying she loved me, that what they say doesn't matter. But after hearing again and again that her boyfriend had no fashion sense, made too little, or lacked ambition, even the strongest mind would start to question, is the person I chose really enough? She never said it aloud, but I could see it in her eyes when I picked her up after work. The way she looked around before getting in the car, her slower smiles, shorter hugs. It started to feel like she was trying to prove something to someone, that she still fit a certain image, even while being with someone like me. One night, I asked her to take a walk around Shelley Lake like we usually did. She declined. She said, "Could you go alone? I'm a bit tired." I didn't push, just nodded and went out. But as I stared at the lake reflecting the amber streetlights, I heard Savannah's voice in my head, calling me, the kind of man you eventually leave behind. The silence between us grew longer. I asked Elle once, "Is there something you want to say?" She shook her head. But it wasn't a no. It felt like resignation. One time, I accidentally saw a message from her coworker Clara on her screen before it locked. Claire wrote, "If you're still this unsure, there's a reason. Aren't you tired of pretending you're okay?" Elle replied, "I don't know. Hudson's good, but sometimes it feels like I'm living a life that's not mine." I didn't confront her, didn't bring it up, but I couldn't sleep that night. Since I met Elle, I never once felt like I was extra in her life. But lately, it seemed like I was only kept around to preserve an image, rather than be her true partner. One evening, she came home late with a bag of takeout and didn't even glance at me. I asked how work was, and she said, "Fine." That word felt like a dull blade, not deep enough to draw blood, but enough to wear you down. I still loved Elle, but slowly, I wasn't sure if she still loved me, or was just clinging to what once felt like love. I didn't know if I was losing her little by little, or if she had already left long ago and just hadn't said it yet. That night, light rain fell as I parked in front of a theater in Midtown. Elle stepped out in a gray coat, smiling. She wrapped her arms around me, rested her head on my shoulder like everything was okay. I held her close, a beat too slow. Not out of hesitation, but because something inside me froze. We had planned to watch a movie she loved. For 2 hours. Elle laughed, leaned into me, even held my hand like when we first started dating. It made me believe maybe this was temporary, that love, like ours, could survive a few outside voices. But when the movie ended, we walked along the wooden bridge in Poland Park. The lake mirrored the golden lights, wind cold and heavy with moisture. Elle slowed her steps, sighed, and suddenly stopped. "Hudson." I turned, her face darkened. "We should end this." At first, I thought I misheard. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my temples. "And what?" I tried to keep my voice calm. "Us. I've thought about it. I can't keep going like this." I said nothing. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because the answers I'd prepared for every possible scenario in 8 years, none applied to that moment. Because of what they said? Elle looked down, then gave a soft nod. "Partly." I took a deep breath, turned toward the water. Not another word came out. "I'm sorry," she said after a pause. I don't even know what I want anymore." I nodded, but didn't look at her, then quietly walked away. Not rushing, not angry, just as if my body instinctively retreated from something that had once been my entire world. I don't remember how I drove home. Headlights blurred on the wet road. My mind blank. For a moment I thought I'd just woken from a long dream. Then I saw the wooden box in my drawer and collapsed. That box took me 3 months to hand carve, paint, and wire. Inside was a custom-made ring. 2 birthstones forming an incomplete heart, surrounded by tiny diamonds, with the engraving, "Forever, no matter what." I had planned to propose on our 8th anniversary, just 2 weeks away. Everything was ready. Asheville trip booked, Riverside dinner, the ring, all of it. 4 hours later, while I sat frozen in the kitchen, my phone buzzed nonstop. The first message from Elle read, "I'm sorry, I was wrong. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want to explain. I let them get in my head. I've quit my job. I've cut them all off. Please don't disappear. I read every word, chest tightening with each line. A part of me wanted to run to her, erase everything, start again. But another part couldn't forget her face when she said, "We should end this." I put the phone down, didn't reply, didn't call back. I powered it off and threw it on the couch. Everything in the apartment suddenly fell silent. The photo we had hanging next to the desk, taken at the lavender garden last summer, looked like a memory that belonged to someone else. I sat there, holding the wooden box, unable to open it. A friend once told me, love doesn't die because of betrayal, it dies because of the silence that comes before it collapses. I'm not sure if Elle betrayed me, but it was her silence, letting others plant their doubts in her mind, slowly pushing me out of the picture, that I couldn't forgive. I loved her, that never changed. But that night, I also realized some words can't be taken back. Some actions, no matter how regretful, leave marks that can't be erased. And sometimes, people only realize they've lost something precious when it never turns back. I woke up the next morning in a half-dazed state, like my mind had just gone through a storm no one warned me about. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, but it didn't bring any warmth. Everything in the apartment was still in place, yet I felt like a stranger inside what once was home. I looked around. Her tea mug was still on the table, my coat hung crooked by the door, and the photo we took in Boone still sat neatly on the shelf. It all felt like it was mocking me for being naive enough to believe love was an unshakable anchor. I didn't know exactly where I went wrong. I always thought I was a good man, caring, mature enough to carry a relationship. But Elle had said she was leaving, not because I did something specific, just because she was not sure anymore. I turned off my phone, not because I wanted to run, but because I didn't have the strength to face calls, texts, explanations, or worse, her prolonged silence. I needed air. A place with no memories, no scent of Elle lingering on the pillow. I threw a few clothes into a backpack, grabbed my laptop, the ring box, a notebook, and left the apartment around noon. The sky was overcast. No rain, no sun, just endless gray, perfectly matching my mood. I drove toward Asheville, aimlessly. Just kept going, farther from the city the better. I finally stopped at a small cabin I had once rented 2 years ago when we wanted to get away for the holidays. The cabin sat beneath tall pines, quiet enough to hear leaves fall. I plugged in the laptop, opened my work software, then left it there. My eyes couldn't focus on even a single line of code. That first night, I couldn't sleep. The cold from the wooden floor crept into my bones. I sipped some whiskey, stared at the ceiling, and ran through endless possibilities in my head. Had I become too plain in Elle's eyes? Or was the love I thought was steady actually the very thing making her feel trapped? 3 days passed. I didn't turn on my phone. Didn't go online. Didn't speak to anyone. It felt like the outside world no longer existed. But on the 4th evening, I collapsed from a piercing headache. My hand shaking so much I dropped a glass of water. I steadied myself, turned on my phone to call a familiar doctor, and was immediately overwhelmed by the flood of notifications. 61 missed calls, 17 voicemails, 412 messages. Elle's name filled the screen. There were also messages from her mother, from Harper, our mutual best friend, and even my boss. One message stood out. "Hudson, please call back. Elle hasn't eaten or slept. She's falling apart. Everyone's worried." We called the police. I frowned. The police? I opened the most recent voicemail. It was Harper's voice, trembling. "Hud, if you hear this, someone called the cops because nobody's heard from you in over 3 days. We're scared. Please call back." Part of me wanted to power off the phone, like I never turned it on. But guilt started creeping in. I never expected my disappearance would cause this kind of chaos. I called Harper first. He sighed with relief when he heard my voice. Then I called my mother, and finally my boss, who told me to take time off without needing to check in. But I still didn't call Elle. We've got an alley. I opened her messages. A long string of them appeared. Some frantic, some tearful. I know I messed up. I never wanted to lose you. I let them get in my head. I was weak. But I've quit. I've blocked every one of them. Please, don't stay silent. I'm scared. Reading that, my hand dropped. I looked at the dusty wooden box on the table. I didn't know what hurt more. That she left? Or that she was trying to come back when everything had already broken. Inside me was a war between pain and longing. I wanted to forgive, but I was afraid of becoming a shadow kept around out of guilt. I looked at the clock. It was close to midnight. I stood, opened the cabin door. Cold wind swept through the porch. In the pale moonlight, I wondered, can love come back to life if it once died in the silence of the one who was supposed to protect it? Saturday afternoon, I returned to Raleigh. I sat in the driver's seat for over 10 minutes before ringing Elle's parents' doorbell. The sky was heavy gray, no sunlight, no rain. It matched exactly how I felt. Weighty, waiting for something unnamed. The door opened before I could knock a second time. Elle stood there, eyes red, mascara streaked down her cheeks. She rushed out and threw her arms around me like I was her last lifeline in a storm. I didn't hug back, just let my arms hang by my sides. "Thank you for coming," she whispered, voice choked. I nodded, silent. Stepping inside, I saw her mother at the kitchen counter, eyes glistening. Her father sat in the armchair, his stare sharper than usual but filled with quiet disappointment. We sat on the couch. Elle sat across from me, fingers laced, eyes lowered. The room was so quiet I could hear the wall clock ticking, like it was counting down my patience. I spoke first. "Why did you ask me here?" Elle looked up, her voice shaking. "Because I need to explain everything. I don't want to lose you, Hudson." I met her eyes. "It's too late, Elle. You said you weren't sure. You chose to leave." She bit her lip, then suddenly broke down. "I was wrong. I was weak. I let their awful words affect me. I shouldn't have listened to them." I didn't move. "Then why did you let it go on for months? Why didn't you stop when I asked directly? Why did you let others decide our future?" Elle froze. She took a deep breath, then spoke softly. "Because I was scared. They made me doubt myself. I didn't think I was enough. I thought I was holding you back." I gave a dry chuckle, not amused. "Is that what you truly thought? Or what they said until you believed it?" She didn't answer. I leaned back, eyes locked on her. "Did you ever stop to think about why I chose you? Because I needed someone to show off? Or because I loved the real you, even when you were struggling with yourself?" Elle buried her face in her hands. Her shoulders trembled with each sob. "I have one more question, and I need a clear answer." My voice stayed calm. "Do you still love me?" "Yes," she said, lifting her head. "I do. I never stopped." So I've stayed silent. I've quit. I've blocked all of them. I'm seeing a therapist. I want to fix this. I looked at her parents. Her father nodded, his first word since I walked in. "She's not lying. We've seen the change." I turned back to Elle. "It's not their words that hurt me, Elle. It's that you listened. You started repeating them. In how you looked at me, like I was a mistake you accidentally committed to." She shook her head, tears pouring. "I know. I killed the trust between us." I reached into my bag and took out the wooden box. "I wasn't planning to show you this, but now I think you should see it." I set the box on the table. The hidden lights in the lid glowed, and the words, "Will you be my life partner?" appeared. Elle stared, eyes wide in disbelief. When I pressed the yes button, the box opened, revealing a ring with our birthstones forming a heart. She choked up. "Were you going to propose to me?" I nodded. 2 weeks before you said goodbye." The room froze. Even Elle's mother couldn't hold back her tears. Her father went quiet. "What about now?" Elle asked, barely breathing. "Could you give me a chance?" I closed the box. "Not right now. I need time. We both do. I don't want to rebuild everything while the foundation's still cracked." She nodded. as if she understood that begging would only deepen the wound. 3 months, I said. No contact. No reaching out. After that, if we both still want it, we'll meet again. But next time, it'll be on my terms. Elle clenched her hands. I'll wait. I stood, thanked her parents for welcoming me, then left. That night, as I drove down a road lined with oak trees, there were no more tears. Just one question lingering in my head. Will 3 months be enough for love to heal? Or just enough time to let go more gently? I stood outside their house, still holding the proposal box tightly, though it was shut. The warm lights spilled from the living room behind me. But I didn't look back. Elle softly called my name, barely a whisper, as if saying it any louder might shatter the moment. I stopped, turned. She stood in the doorway, face soaked in tears, her whole body straining not to collapse. I stepped forward and opened my arms. Elle ran into them like she'd vanish, if she didn't. I held her one last time, not as a promise, not to hold on, just to say goodbye with grace. Goodbye, Elle, I whispered, then let go. Her mother stepped out, nodded gently at me, eyes red. Her father gripped my shoulder, squeezed. Silent, but I felt his quiet understanding. They once thought I'd be their future son-in-law. Now, I wasn't sure either. Before leaving, I knocked lightly on Elle's sister Ava's door. She was 16, but had long seen me as her big brother. Ava opened the door, eyes red. I smiled, touched her shoulder. Thank you for always having my back, I said, and gave her one last hug. Take care of your sister. Ava nodded, didn't speak, just gripped my hand tightly. I leapt into a heavy silence. No one followed, no one called my name. I returned to the cabin in Asheville that evening, colder than before. The half-finished cup of coffee was still on the table. I placed the proposal box in the drawer, next to the journal I used to jot down our milestones. I didn't plan to write again, at least not for 3 months. The next day, I emailed in a request for 3 weeks off. My boss understood and even said, if you need more, just say so. I exhaled. Work could wait. My mind needed fixing now. I started waking early, jogging in the woods every morning. No earbuds, no music, just the sound of footsteps on damp earth and birdsong echoing in solitude. At first, I felt empty. Then it got easier to breathe. I no longer felt like I was drowning. I relearned how to cook. Toasted bread. Brewed coffee by hand instead of using the machine. Chopped wood for warmth instead of flipping a switch. Every small action helped me regain control, something I hadn't felt in 2 months. Elle didn't message again after that night. No emails, no calls. That surprised me. Part of me feared she'd try to interrupt the silence I was building, but when she stayed quiet like I'd asked, I felt a strange hollowness. I spent an afternoon sorting through things connected to her. Photo albums, birthday gifts, handwritten notes. I didn't burn them, didn't throw them away. I packed them into a box and stored it in the attic of the cabin. Old love, even when no longer useful, deserves to be kept somewhere respectful. 2 weeks passed. I no longer thought about Elle every hour like before, but at night before switching off the light, she'd still slip into my mind. Her smile watching fireworks, the way she tilted her head while sketching, or when she curled up in my arms and asked, "Do you think we'll grow old together?" I didn't have an answer, not because I didn't want to, but because I wasn't sure if the person thinking of me now was still the Elle I once loved. I turned on my phone just to check work emails, no new messages. The last text from Elle still read, "I'll wait." I didn't know whether to feel relief or regret at that silence. That night, I took out the proposal box again, not to admire it, just to check if the battery in the light still worked. When I pressed the yes button, the lights still glowed. "Will you be my life partner?" lit up clearly. Everything inside was just as I left it, except my heart wasn't. I closed the box. 3 months isn't long, but it's enough to learn a truth. People can love each other deeply, yet still need distance, just to see if love can survive without routine or fear of loss. I don't know what the future holds, But if Elle truly wants to return, she'll have to be the one to step forward, not out of fear of losing me, but out of courage to keep me. As for me, I need to be sure I won't open that box again, unless my heart has no doubts left. 3 weeks after our last meeting at her house, I began weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Malone, the one Harper had recommended last year when I was overwhelmed with work. This time it was different. I wasn't going because of burnout, but because of a void inside me that no schedule or trip could fill. "You're clenching yourself inside the silence you created," Dr. Malone said in our third session. "Hudson, loving someone who hurt you doesn't make you weak. It only proves you once loved them honestly." That line haunted me the entire night. I thought about Elle, about whether she was trying as she said. I returned to the company part-time. The unfinished projects were handled more easily than I expected. Coworkers were still kind, my boss still patient, and life outside of Elle moved on as if nothing had happened. But I hadn't forgotten, only learning how to live with the memory. News about Elle came from Harper first. He texted that she'd quit her old studio 3 days after our meeting. No drama, no argument, just a resignation letter and quiet departure. I wasn't surprised, but I didn't know how to feel. A week later, Ava messaged, "Hudson, Elle started therapy. I saw in her journal that she wants to study architecture again. I think she's really changing." I didn't reply, but I saved the message. A few days later, I ran into Elle in public. It was at Harper's daughter's birthday party. I was invited ahead of time, came out of courtesy, never expected Elle to be there. She walked in wearing a pale blue dress, hair tied neatly, her face thinner, but her eyes steady. When our eyes met, we nodded. No avoidance, but no approach either. We sat at separate tables. No one tried to start a conversation. But when Harper called everyone out back for group photos, Elle came over, gently asked, "Are you doing okay?" I said, "Okay, I guess." Then I asked, "And you?" "I'm learning how to live without depending on other people's voices," she answered, eyes fixed on the sunlight slipping past the porch. That answer made me pause, because that was what I always hoped she'd realize. After that party, we didn't initiate contact, but some invisible thread kept pulling us into shared social events. An old company fundraiser, a friend's art show, even Ava's school play. Each time we exchanged a few short lines, no digging into the past, no talk of the future, just polite, slightly hesitant questions. "Still studying architecture? Back to full-time work yet? Ava's still running wild in class?" It felt like we were reintroducing ourselves, but neither of us brave enough to revisit what came before. I still haven't opened the proposal box again since that night at the cabin. Haven't written another page in our shared journal. Everything remains untouched, like a cocoon waiting to either bloom or rot. One day, I saw Elle standing alone at the gallery, red wine in hand, staring at a sketch of a wooden cabin in the woods. When I walked up, she didn't turn, just said softly, "If I could turn back time, I'd silence every outside voice, just to hear you clearly." I didn't reply. Not every regret needs an immediate answer. I focused more on work, enrolled in an advanced UX design course, ate out with colleagues, joined a few outdoor events, but deep down I was still waiting for something more certain from her. Not just changed behavior, but a decisive act that proved she truly wanted to stay. The 3 months were almost up. I wasn't sure what waited at the end of this quiet stretch. If Elle showed up, I wouldn't reach out first. She'd have to knock on the door I had closed, and knock hard. With resolve, not with tears or promises. Because I don't need another apology. I need someone who knows how to stay. By mid-November, the headaches behind my temples were getting worse. At first, I thought it was just from lack of sleep, stress from work, and lingering emotions about Elle. But then one morning, while working on documents, the vision in my right eye suddenly blurred. I rubbed my eyes, drank coffee, tried to shake it off. But by the third time in 1 week that everything in front of me stretched into foggy streaks, I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. One afternoon, while walking with Harper through Shelley Park, I felt my head explode. I couldn't hear his voice next to me. The world spun. Then everything went dark. I woke up in the hospital to 2 medical staff checking my heart rate and blood pressure. A young nurse told me I had a seizure in the park and was rushed in for emergency care. After a series of tests, MRI scans, and neurological exams, the doctor looked at me with a grave expression. He didn't try to hide. "Hudson, we've discovered a tumor in the left frontal lobe. It's a glioma, about the size of 1 inch. It hasn't spread to other areas yet, but we need to intervene soon." It took me a few seconds to process what he had just said. The words brain tumor hit me like a hammer to the chest. I nodded, too dry-throated to ask anything more. The first person to show up after Harper wasn't my mom, not a coworker. It was Elle. She rushed into the room like a ghost, her hair windswept, her face pale. Her eyes were puffy, and she still wore the tiny bracelet I gave her last year. She didn't ask anything, didn't say sorry, just sat beside the bed and took my hand. I was about to pull away, but when I saw the panic in her eyes, I let her hold on. Partly because I didn't have the strength, partly because I had never seen Elle that afraid. A few hours later, my parents arrived, bringing old medical records from a previous clinic. The coordinator told us they were waiting to schedule surgery with Dr. Carpenter, a renowned neurosurgeon in the state, currently working at the Chapel Hill Medical Center. If I was lucky, I'd be in surgery within 2 weeks. While everyone discussed things with the doctors, Elle came back into the room with a head nurse. "They asked if you want to designate someone as your primary caregiver while you wait for surgery," she said in a near whisper. "If you'll let me, I want to be here." I looked at her. Red eyes, shaking shoulders. Not someone trying to redeem herself, but someone who would fall apart if I said no. I wasn't sure if it was the fog in my brain or a swell of emotion, but I nodded slightly. From that day on, Elle moved into the family care room next to mine. She brought books, herbal tea, and the neck pillow I once used on a trip to Tennessee. She never brought up the past, never pushed for love or answers. She simply cared for me, feeding me porridge, logging my medication times, gently pressing my forehead when pain hit. Every morning, Elle opened the window to let sunlight in, then read aloud from books I used to love. Every night, she pulled the curtains closed, helped me put on headphones playing jazz I once said sounded like a sleepy heartbeat. I couldn't deny Elle's presence made everything less terrifying. I didn't know if it was lingering love or simply that, when you face death, you reach for the hands that once made you feel alive. Every time the doctors came in with test results, Elle stood beside me taking notes on everything they said. It was as if she had become someone else. Calm, steady, and ready to give everything just so I wouldn't feel alone. One night, before sleep, after all the lights had dimmed and only the soft beeping of machines filled the room, I turned my head. Elle was asleep on the long chair, still holding my hand. She wasn't the Elle from Fragile Conversations, not the girl swayed by outside judgment. Just Elle. Conflicted, real, and here, when I didn't know if anyone else would be. I closed my eyes without feeling empty. I hadn't forgiven her yet, but in that moment, I wasn't afraid of fighting alone anymore. The surgery began at 7 a.m. All I remembered was a blurred glimpse of Ella and my mother holding each of my hands. Then the operating room doors closed, the red light came on, and I remembered nothing. I woke up at 3:30 that same afternoon, feeling like someone had taken me apart and rewired me with threads thinner than nerves. The fluorescent lights above were hazy, the antiseptic stung my throat, and the monitor's steady beeps hummed like background music that never stopped. Dr. Carpenter was the first face I saw. Behind a surgical mask and thick glasses, he smiled slightly. "We were able to remove nearly the entire tumor, Hudson. There was a little bleeding during removal, but nothing serious. Now you just need to rest and stay under observation for a few more days." I tried to nod, but my jaw and neck were stiff like cement. I turned my eyes to the right and saw Elle there, her charcoal hoodie wrinkled, but her eyes brighter than I had ever seen them. "I'm here," she whispered, barely moving. "From the start to the end. I haven't left." I couldn't speak, but something in my chest softened, like someone had just pulled the covers up to warm the emptiness. 3 days later, I was moved from ICU to the special care ward. The incision on the back of my head still ached, but my mind had begun to clear. The doctor let me sit up on the 4th day, and by the 5th, I could take a few steps around the room. Through all that, Elle never left the hospital. She slept on a fold-out chair, ate vending machine snacks, and only went home for 1 hour each day to shower. She didn't talk much, just quietly handled everything I didn't have energy for. Medication, checkup appointments, updating loved ones, even wiping my forehead when I had a fever. I started to notice something I'd only suspected before. Elle wasn't the same person. She wasn't anxious, hesitant, or avoiding eye contact anymore. Every time she looked at me, her eyes carried something deeper, like someone who had crossed a desert of regret and finally found water. One afternoon while I was resting, Elle's phone rang. It was her dad. I overheard her speaking softly in the corner. "Yes, Dad, he's okay. They got most of it. No, I haven't said anything yet. I just want him to recover." Then she returned to my side and smiled. "My parents asked if you need a place to recover after discharge. They'd like you to stay with us. I'll take care of you. I even fixed up your old room." I looked at her for a long moment before answering. My thoughts were tangled. I wasn't angry at Elle anymore, but I wasn't ready to act like nothing had happened either. "Not yet," I said. "I need a few days to think." Elle nodded. No pressure, no sadness. She just gently squeezed my hand. "Whatever you choose, I'll be here. On time. I don't expect forgiveness right away. I just want you to know I still love you." I didn't respond to that. But one thing I couldn't deny. Her persistence no longer felt like clinging out of fear. It was intentional. Like a redemption she didn't feel entitled to, but chose to earn anyway. Since waking up, Elle hadn't brought up the past. She didn't mention us. Didn't reopen old wounds. She let me decide when those memories should surface. And honestly, that's the only reason I didn't push her away. That evening, after Elle left the hospital for a short break at home, I pulled out the journal Harper had brought the day before. On the first page, I wrote, November 26th. Surgery went well. Mild head pain. Heart steady. Feelings unclear. Elle's here. But I still don't know if here means what it used to. I closed the notebook, looked out the hospital window where city lights blurred against the glass. Below, people rushed past like no one had just stepped back from the edge of life and death. I let out a slow breath. I didn't know what would happen once I left this place, but at least for now, Elle was still here, and maybe it was because she truly wanted to be. Hudson had endured a heartbreak that nearly broke him, only to face a health crisis just as he began to rebuild. But in that darkness, he discovered who stayed. Elle, the one who had once shattered his trust, had quietly changed and proved that love isn't always in what's said, but what's done. Though Hudson hasn't defined their future, his journey shows us. Sometimes, love reveals itself most clearly on the edge between life and loss. Do you think Hudson should forgive Elle and give her a second chance, or keep moving forward on his own? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about love, family, and life lessons.